Here's what Mr Given said at the start of the week.
Sinn Féin are not my partners in government. To infer that there is a partnership, that suggests something that isn't actually the reality of how the electoral politics works.
With relations at Stormont nosediving and the likelihood of more of the same to come on Monday, can the executive parties fight each other and still deliver for the people? I'll be discussing that and next week's vote of no confidence in Paul Given with the DUP, Alliance and the SDLP live in the studio. Plus, what could it mean for party fortunes and the border poll debate? Newton Emerson and Noel Doran are standing by with their thoughts. Hello. Talk of a Stormont collapse has been dismissed for now, but what's the end point if things keep going the way they are? We'll discuss that and the controversial Israel visit shortly. But first, to give you a flavour of the wider Stormont mood, here's how the politicians picked up when they returned from their mid-term break on Monday.
Even with issues such as this today, you find reasons to poke each other in the eye instead of actually acknowledging the pain and hurt that our people have went through.
This was never an attempt to get to the truth. It was about propaganda, pure and simple. An attempt to rewrite the narrative of the past.
The decision not to convict Soldier F is a travesty.
I welcome the vindication of a soldier who has borne the weight of years of scrutiny, uncertainty and the stigma of accusation.
There's no doubt that the depth of feeling on this issue is felt right across the community in Northern Ireland, regardless of what side of that debate or community you feel you sit on.
Putting a para flag, a parachute regiment insignia on your social media in the light of this trial, catch yourselves on.
It's gotten so personal and so nasty. Anytime anyone stands up, there's just this niggling behind, are we going to do this for the next 18 months?
OK, folks, see, before we go on to next any business, people need to chill their jets.
I think the motion today is merely reflecting widespread public disbelief and anger at the fact that the Minister made this trip. He should not have made this trip.
This is what the public are going to hear about what's happening in Stormont today and over the next number of weeks. Needlessly. It's nonsense. It's performative, it's pantomime season come early, and it's not going to change one thing.
We're not the pantomime dame in this particular show. We haven't engaged in provocative coat trailing. We haven't accepted trips paid for by governments accused of human rights abuses.
He has shown he is not fit to be an education minister, and we have no confidence in him. He should pack his bags and go now.
Sinn Féin need to get the message, and get the message very clearly. It is the unionist people of Northern Ireland who elect my party and put me into this position. I'll never be dictated to by Sinn Féin.
Where is the Minister's humanity?
You may have tried to bully other people in the past. It won't work with me. You may not like the answers, but you're going to listen to it from me today, tomorrow, next week, next month, next year. Am I living in a parallel universe? Whenever it came for the members opposite, how many of you were incarcerated and held in the Maze prison in Maghaberry, in Crumlin Road because of your terrorist criminal convictions? How many of your family members were engaged in terrorism? And you have the audacity to sit there and lecture me and others whenever it comes to this visit to Israel.
Is it really appropriate for the Minister to be laughing, sniggering and smiling when we're talking about the innocent killing of thousands of children? He is laughing like a Disney villain.
You're completely out of step with public opinion. You're completely out of step with the majority opinion in this House. Will you save yourself further embarrassment and step down now, Minister?
Well, that's just a flavour of the debate in the Assembly at the start of the week. I'm joined now by the SDLP leader Claire Hanna, the Alliance MLA Kate Nicholl and the DUP MLA David Brooks. Thank you all for joining us on the programme tonight. David Brooks, let's just deal with this Israel visit first of all, and you were on it as well. In what capacity did Paul Given visit Israel?
Paul Given travelled to Israel as an MLA who was invited to undertake the trip in the same way that I. Other members of other parties were invited, and indeed a couple of councillors were invited as well. But while on the trip, he took up the opportunity to visit a school, and I think that was relevant to the post that he holds here in terms of his role as the Education Minister.
So, for part of that trip, he was there in an official Education Minister capacity.
Well, he travelled on the basis of a private MLA and undertook the trip on that basis.
Yeah, but when he was there, he fulfilled a role as Education Minister.
The opportunity, whenever it arose to visit a school, of course he undertook that to see some of what was going on in the Israeli education system. What we've seen was Arabs, Jews, Christians learning together, and something that's a positive story about that school. And I think he wanted to reflect that in terms of his role as Education Minister.
Yeah, not everybody, of course, interpreted it in that positive way. When he was speaking from Israel on Friday, the 31st of October, to talk back on Radio Ulster, he said he wouldn't hesitate. He said, "I wouldn't hesitate to visit my official capacity as Education Minister. That is something I will do in my role as Education Minister." So he was in no doubt that that was part of an official function for him in that role.
I mean, the context of that comments from what you read there, I don't know whether he was talking about now in the future, whether, but I think he's very comfortable.
He was talking about the trip to Israel.
Oh, well, he's very comfortable with the trip.
And in fact, at that point in the trip, which was early, he talked about having a number of visits to make in his capacity as Education Minister. Turns out he only fulfilled one of them, but he was saying he was going to have several engagements.
Well, there was a number of discussions around educational issues in Israel. There was a particular visit to a school, and that was publicised, in my opinion, rightly on the department's website for that visit. But there was certainly conversations around educational issues in Israel as part of the trip.
OK, so here's the question that I think cuts to the chase. Did the Education Department here know about in advance and agree to Paul Given visiting a school in East Jerusalem in his official capacity?
I mean, I don't work within the department, and you would maybe need to ask the Minister in the department those questions.
Well, I'm sure you must have thought I might ask that tonight, and you must have spoken to the relevant people to find out what the answer might be.
I can't tell you what officials knew what when, but certainly I'm pretty sure the department knew that the Minister was in Israel.
OK, so the department knew he was in Israel. Do you imagine that the department signed off and agreed to the fact that he was going to undertake official government business on that visit? Seems a reasonable question to ask.
The department obviously saw fit to put it out on their official social media feeds.
That was after it had happened.
The Permanent Secretary has also given the Minister a clean bill of health in that regard. So,
yes, but I mean, come on. That's like the department marking its own homework. The Permanent Secretary to the Department of Education says the Education Minister behaved appropriately.
Well, you were asking me whether the department knew. I can't tell you what officials knew what when, but I can tell you that the department obviously seen it as appropriate enough to put it out on its social media feeds and to stand over it. And I think they're right to do so.
Yes, and now there are further investigations, of course.
Well, investigations there may be, but we'll see the outcomes of that. Unfortunately, Mark, the parties who want some of these questions answered haven't waited to find out some of the answers to the questions. They've demanded the Permanent Secretary appears at the Education Committee next week. They haven't waited to see what answers he will give. Instead, they've been led by the nose by Jerry Carroll on a no-confidence vote. Okay, well. And a man who tweeted on the 7th of October as Hamas murdered and raped and pillaged Israel that... victory to the Palestinian resistance. That's the kind of man that these parties are rowing in behind. And we had talk of pantomime season, but we can see who's behind Alliance, the SDLP and Sinn Féin and who's pulling their strings, and that's Jerry Carroll. OK, and we'll come on to talk about that issue in a bit more detail in just a moment or two, if you don't mind. But I just want to get Claire Hanna's response to something you said a moment or two ago. Your party is the lead party of opposition in the Assembly. And as David Brooks says, the Permanent Secretary in the Department of Education has indicated that there is no issue with the visit. So isn't that the matter closed?
Well, that's why my colleague Cara Hunter has asked for him to appear before the Education Committee, and that's why we have been in touch with the head of the Civil Service to ask for their formal, I suppose, analysis of the decisions that were taken and who triggered those decisions and the resources that were used. And more importantly, Mark, this is about prevention. This is about stability as well. We're using our opposition time on Monday to bring forward a motion on Stormont reform, which is something something there's been a lot of chat about, but very little action to ensure that we can't have collapse accidentally or the threat of collapse, and that should include accountability mechanisms, because it's true that the vote of no confidence won't get rid of Paul Givan, although MLAs are entitled to express the real upset of many of their constituents. But that's not to say that people here aren't entitled to accountability like they are in every other democracy.
OK, I want to ask you about that Jerry Carroll tweet that's been raised by David Brooks. On the morning of October the 7th, Mr Carroll tweeted the phrase "victory to the Palestinian resistance" alongside emojis of two clenched fists. Did the SDLP condemn that tweet at the time?
Nobody is pulling the SDLP strings. We're responding to the very deep concern. I think it's important to say, and that was that video of all the fractious, fighty MLAs, and that is frustrating, and I think it's one of the reasons people are checking out of Stormont, but these are very emotive issues. I speak for the SDLP. The SDLP has been very clear in our condemnation of all violence, including this disgusting, cynical violence that took place on the 7th of October. So nobody else decides our policy, and we don't subscribe to anybody else's views.
But you are following him in his determination to have a vote of no confidence.
Because it's simply not possible to table a parallel motion. We're not. That happens all the time when members vote on the same motion. That doesn't mean they're following. There's times, I'm sure my colleagues have voted on the same motion as Kate's party, as David's. Doesn't mean they're following them. So the SDLP decides the SDLP's strategy. The SDLP is unequivocal in its views on violence for political means, and it's that failure to understand from Paul Givan in all of the many media moments he had this week that he didn't even begin to acknowledge why people, that this isn't just a little disagreement, oh, you like this team and we like that team. We're talking about the deaths of tens of thousands, just relentless bombardment of a completely defenceless people, and just a failure to acknowledge why people are upset about such an uncritical view as he has taken of Israel.
OK, let's bring in Kate Nicholl at this point. Jerry Carroll, he hasn't addressed the issues regarding that particular tweet, and he's not here to speak for himself tonight. Your colleague in the chamber, Michelle Guy, was accused of not condemning Jerry Carroll's tweet by the DUP during the week. Can you just clarify, did the Alliance Party condemn that tweet when it happened on October the 7th?
Yeah, we condemned it at the time, and we've condemned it since. We completely distanced ourselves from that tweet. We thought it was appalling. We stand with human rights, so we take a very keen interest in what's happening in Gaza. And so we think it's right to sign this motion. But I just want to pick up that point about leading Jerry Carroll, being led by Jerry Carroll. We take our decisions based on merit, and we consider them and we do what we think is right. We don't make our decisions based through an orange or green lens. We look at it objectively, and we took this decision. We're not led by anyone. And it's a strange argument because we all vote and sign different motions brought by different parties, and we have massive ideological differences. So it doesn't really hold that argument. We have no confidence in the minister for several reasons, and that's why we're going to vote in favour on Monday. OK, I want to bring David Brooks back in again, because that was very clear from Kate Nicholl that the Alliance Party condemned that tweet at the time whenever Jerry Carroll posted it. But you yoked that in with charges of anti-Semitism levelled at the other parties in the chamber. You personally did that the other day. What have you got to say to Kate Nicholl now?
Well, I think there is an issue around that. I mean,
well, do you welcome the clarification on the tweet? First of all,
I certainly welcome. I think any reasonable person would condemn a tweet that essentially was cheerleading the murder and rape and pillaging.
Those aren't my views or Kate's views or the views of the SDLP or the Alliance. It's pure distraction and deflection.
I welcome them being put on record.
Both of these parties are very.
What about your colleague Paul Givan? David Brooks, what about your colleague Paul Givan, who made the charge against Michelle Guy in the chamber? Would he have to retract that charge now and accept the bona fides of Kate Nicholl, given what she's just said?
I haven't reviewed what was said at the time
Mark,
around
sorry,
that
I'm not going to be lumped
I think we are.
In any other place
they've themselves in. They've aligned themselves to Jerry Carroll, fallen in behind him. For any questions were...
But they've just clarified that that's not what they're doing. They say that's a complete misrepresentation of their position.
Before they've had any of the officials at committees and questions that they say need to be answered, they readily weighed in behind Jerry Carroll. And we know Jerry Carroll's character on this, but because we've seen the tweet that he put out on October the 7th. That is vile. It's one of the most vile things that I have seen after an atrocity of that nature, and yet it didn't give pause for thought to these parties. It didn't give pause for thought. They rode in behind quite readily.
What about the charge of anti-Semitism? How can you stand over a charge of anti-Semitism? Surely it is perfectly possible, and you talked about institutionalised anti-Semitism. It is perfectly possible, is it not, to be critical of the Israeli government, to condemn the actions of the Israeli government, but not to be anti-Semitic?
It's absolutely possible to be critical of the Israeli government and not be anti-Semitic.
Well, that's not what you said in the chamber.
Some of the Jews that I met on my trip were heavily critical of the Israeli government.
You didn't say that in the chamber.
I met with people in Nir Oz kibbutz, where 25% of the people who lived there were murdered by Hamas and Palestinian Islamic Jihad, and they have criticisms of the government. I met with a college in Tel Aviv who wonder why they are being why European universities and UK universities won't engage with them, despite them seeing themselves as almost a liberal opposition to.
Let me bring Claire Hanna back in again. I want you to respond to that charge from David Brooks in the chamber of the Assembly on Monday when he talked about the obsession and faux outrage of the parties who were. He talked about them being fueled by the institutional anti-Semitism that is characteristic of the parties, backing a vote of no confidence being led by a man who on October the 7th tweeted a cheerleading tweet while Jews were being massacred in Israel. He's saying that your party is institutionally anti-Semitic.
I mean, it's outrageous and it's not plausible. I think anybody believes it. I'm not even sure.
Well, do you think David Brooks believes it?
I don't think David Brooks.
He said it in the chamber.
I think you're defaulting to a very, very weak argument, and I suspect you have a broader mind than that. I don't think anybody truly believes that my party or Kate's are anti-Semitic. In fact, there are Jewish people around the world who have expressed their concerns. We're not, as I say, this isn't about, and people can support in principle and the existence of a Jewish state and all of those things. That's a separate matter from, as I say, relentless military bombardment for over 2 years, long past any possible achievement of military objections. But Mark, the whole thing's a lot of deflection. You said in your introduction, can they continue to have these rows while still delivering? They're not delivering. The executive and the Assembly are not improving people's lives. Yeah. So in many ways, all of these spats and all of the culture war, because it isn't just this week, we've been getting weeks and weeks of this distraction and deflection because there isn't any vision and there isn't any delivery coming from Stormont, and that's probably what we need to talk about more.
Well, that is what we're going to talk about more in just a second. Before I do that, very briefly, I want to bring Kate Nicholl in just to respond to that charge of institutional anti-Semitism on the part of the Alliance Party.
No, I mean, I reject it. I reject it completely. I think that this is a conflation of Judaism, which is a religion, and cultural identity, and Zionism. They're different. You can criticize the Israeli government for what it is doing. It is accused of genocide and war crimes, and still recognize Israel's right to exist and right to defend itself, and condemn the genocidal acts that are happening as well. You can condemn what happened on the 7th of October. 20. I mean,
there is no.
Does the DUP is the DUP able to identify?
Having visited, if the Israelis are trying to commit a genocide, they're doing a very poor job of it. I have to say, because
David,
I have been in Israel. I've seen Christians, Arabs, and Jews mixing throughout. There's no doubt been many deaths, and it's been tragic to see events in Gaza. No doubt there's been many deaths, but there's deaths and conflicts and wars throughout the world. There are other which we don't see marches about. We don't see these parties giving concern about. These parties are uniquely fixated on the world's only Jewish state. That is where they want. There was no such commentary whenever Claire's colleague visited Lebanon.
You don't accept the charge and the serious conversation that is taking place about whether or not there is genocide or has been genocide in Gaza with over 60,000 people killed.
I believe there has been many people killed. I have to say, Mark, the BBC's reporting on this, and not you, but the BBC's reporting on this has not been faultless. I mean, I visited a town where the Druze community had 12 young children.
But that's not what we're talking about. That's not what we're talking about at the moment.
We're talking about the BBC's reporting of this being not faultless either. They reported that an Israeli rocket had killed 12 children on a football pitch at one stage, and that was a Hezbollah rocket that came because Lebanon has singularly, along with the UN, failed to protect Israel's northern border, as they said they would.
And I take the point that you're making. I'm not going to comment on that particular incident because I don't have all of the facts in front of me, but I am aware of the case you're talking about. But the point is, you're talking about one incident in one area involving a relatively small number of people, tragic though it may have been, though it was. What they are talking about is over 60,000 people being killed.
There have been many thousands of deaths in Gaza. I acknowledge that it's tragic as part of the futility of war.
Right.
It is very sad. But I'm quite genuine about it. No, I'm not flippant about it. But it is something we see across the world. It is not unique to Israel. Okay. And Israel had the attacks on October 7 and is trying to defend its own people at a time whenever Hamas, we know, used their own people as human shields.
Well, we need to move on. We're not going to get agreement on that issue.
I
do need to move on to the delivery.
A cross-party delegation to Lebanon, not funded by any government. He didn't make little propaganda videos for any, and they met a range of stakeholders. The second thing is, and I've been
we're not going to reach agreement on this now, and we just need to be careful.
I think we should acknowledge, Mark, as well, that the figures you're using largely come from Hamas authorities.
I think
maybe through,
and that is widely reported, but those figures are also widely accepted internationally. I want to ask you now about delivery. Toxic Thunderdome was the phrase that was used in the chamber this week. The question is, what impact all of these issues that we've been discussing, and others that we haven't but we've just referenced, are having on relations between the parties at Stormont? What are we to make of Paul Given's quote David Brooks on the radio on Monday, "Sinn Féin are not my partners in government"? Really?
That is the nature of mandatory coalition. It puts people together that would not ordinarily be together in government.
Yeah, but you are partners in government.
I don't think anybody who votes for myself, for the DUP, for Paul Given, thinks that we are elected to sing Kumbaya with Sinn Féin around the executive table. There's going to be differences. There's going to be sometimes battles around issues that we have strong disagreements on. Yeah. And I think Paul's rhetoric was reflecting that.
But it's a big change of tone, isn't it? Hang on. It's a very big change of tone. Sinn Féin are not my partners in government. That's what he says now. A couple of months ago, his leader in Stormont, Emma Little-Pengelly, the Deputy First Minister, is talking about 99% plus of the time we are working to get delivery for the people of Northern Ireland. We are trying to disagree agreeably.
The two things can be true. But Mark, even we've seen some of the rhetoric and stuff in the Assembly chamber that played earlier out. But other parts, even on that day within the Assembly chamber, there was more agreement. There was issues being discussed. That sometimes these things where we have disagreements get a huge amount of coverage. But there are other issues where people want to see better for all communities, and there is a greater degree of joint working and working together. But I think Paul's point was that he felt within that interview it was being painted that there was an overly friendly partnership between ourselves.
Well, he described partnership as a pejorative term. Is partnership a pejorative term?
No, of course not.
Are the parties sitting around the executive table working in partnership?
Well, I believe they are. I know that Naomi.
Do you believe the DUP and Sinn Féin are partners in government?
I think that I was off on maternity leave for 6 months and I've just come back, and it was noticeable how poor relations are and what a lack of goodwill there is.
Did it feel more toxic to you than it felt 6 months ago?
It felt more I was in the chamber on that Monday morning and I could just feel it coming up. The Minister for Education went on the radio and said that he's not partners with Sinn Féin. But then that evening, we were having a debate on childcare, and childcare is so important, and it's going to be delivered by education, economy and health. So they have these conversations, but it plays out in what confidence do people have that these departments are going to be able to deliver on the essentials? So you can say that, no, don't interrupt because you've talked a lot. You can say that they're going to, that it comes out at the beginning and then later on everything's okay. It's not, and it spills out. We see it spilling out into council chambers, into society. Right. We need to do something about the humanity and our politics.
I need to bring Claire in here. I need to bring Claire in. This is all the more difficult given that resources are as stretched as they are.
Mark, resources are. Every single government in the world does have constraints, and I don't doubt that. But we do also have to look at how they're spending the money they have. £3.1 billion of overspends on capital projects. Just this week, the Audit Office being very clear about their concerns about the accounts of the Economy Department. We're not getting ideas. We're getting lots of letters to the Treasury about how we should get more money. We're not seeing reforms. We're not seeing wider programmes. So, as I say, people are disconnected from Stormont, from the SDLP party's perspective, we will do everything in our power to improve things, create a culture of accountability. As I say, we are focused on driving through reforms. But I'm going to be very honest, a functioning Stormont, and we'll work for it, it's not the limit of our ambition. We are building something new and beyond Stormont. And I think scenes like that, when we look at, if we look at the positivity coming, if you look at Mamdani elected in New York, you look at democratic socialism on the rise across the European Union, I think people are seeing hope in politics, but they're absolutely not seeing it in Stormont. So constraints exist on every government, but we do need to start looking at how this executive are spending the money they do have and the total dearth of ideas from all of the parties.
OK, you were saying, dear oh dear, at the fact that New York has just elected a Democrat mayor who, of course, President Trump describes as a Maoist and a communist, charges which he completely denies. And you've been to America, you know how the American system works very, very well. So that's an interesting comment on that. What about back closer to home in this toxic atmosphere that we've been discussing around the table tonight? When we hear a Deputy First Minister talking about the need to disagree agreeably, do you think that that means we are set up right for her to be heading down to Dublin to attend the inauguration of President Catherine Connolly on Tuesday? Do you think that's likely to happen?
I don't manage the Deputy First Minister's diary, Mark. You'd have to ask Deputy First Minister and her office in that regard. But I'll give you an example. Sinn Féin aren't here to speak for themselves. The people here perhaps can speak for them. But what I would say in regards to the partnership working, one thing Sinn Féin could do to demonstrate partnership around the executive table is they're currently blocking Paul Gibbons' SEN capital investment programme to help invest in our special schools. If we want to see
let's just stay on this issue. Let's stay on this issue.
It's an example of where there are difficulties between parties.
We know there are difficulties within parties.
Our party wants to advance something positive for our special schools.
Well, then, if you want to advance something positive and you want to send out a positive message and you want to fight against the toxicity that we've been talking about, would it not make sense for Emma Little Pengelly to follow the example set by her mentor 14 years ago, Peter Robinson, who went down to attend the inauguration of President Michael D. Higgins? With Martin McGuinness.
Well, that is something I'm sure the Deputy First Minister will give due consideration to. But
she hasn't replied yet. We know that Michelle O'Neill has been invited and has accepted. We've been chasing.
I'm not surprised that Michelle O'Neill has accepted.
So the invitation's been
was Michelle O'Neill's candidate, and the rhetoric of both her and the outgoing president.
Well, let me ask you this personally. You're quite right. Of course, you don't manage Emma Little Pengelly's diary. I understand that you don't. We've been chasing the Executive Office for an answer as to whether or not Emma Little Pengelly is going to go since 10 o'clock this morning. So 13 hours later, despite repeated attempts on our part to get an answer, we still don't have an answer. Would you personally be happy for her to go down?
I mean, it's not.
But that's a yes or a no.
I mean, I would have concerns, personally speaking for myself, I would have concerns around where the Irish presidency is going. But there's an element that has to be considered around there in terms of what the role is and whether that's separate to the person. That's something that Emma and her office will consider for themselves. It's not for me to tell
but if she decides that she is going down, you'll back her.
I will back her in whatever she decides.
OK, that's a non-answer. Claire.
That's disappointing that we're going backwards. That 14 years ago, we could see those acts of generosity. There's no doubt.
Those acts of generosity has not been the same from the South.
But I don't know what rhetoric are you talking about? Because there's no doubt there was sectarianism, Heather. But no, that didn't.
Michael D. Higgins couldn't come to a church service.
You know that Michelle O'Neill is going to the Cenotaph to lay a wreath on Sunday.
Yeah, but we've talked about acts of generosity here.
Is that not an act of generosity?
You talked about Catherine Connolly's rhetoric. What rhetoric are you talking about?
Well, hold on.
What you said it.
The outgoing Irish president couldn't come to a centenary church service for Northern Ireland. So there's been disrespect from the Irish Republic shown towards unionists for some time now.
OK, all right. So I need to bring Claire in Kate in for a final thought. We're out of time.
Every day we have people who come from conflicts all over the world to the Assembly to see how we do it. And they come here to get hope. And we need to get back to that courage and compassion and humanity that was in our politics before. Our problems are not insurmountable. We can get there, but we have to do better in how we talk about these things. And we're not there at the moment.
OK, and just, yes or no from each of you, should Emma Little Pengelly be at the inauguration in Dublin?
I think it would be a graceful thing to do.
Yes, she should.
OK, simple as that. All right, look, we need to leave it there. We're out of time. We've covered a lot of ground. Thank you all very much indeed. Listening to that, two columnists who've had some interesting things to say over the past few days, Newton Emerson and the former editor of the Irish News, Noel Doran. Gentlemen, welcome to you both. Thank you very much for being with us. Newton, I want to start with you. You've written this week, both about a more strident type of unionism, FU unionism you call it, and what it might mean for the Alliance Party. Well, just talk us through the theory.
Well, the whole of unionism appears to be being pulled to the right by the TUV, the strength of the TUV in the polls. The DUP is clearly worried about still the lingering issue of the sea border, and it's vulnerable on that point. So it is moving towards the TUV. But there's also a push from the centre, because it does seem that Alliance is losing some of its unionist background supporters. That's what opinion polls suggest. And it's no longer clear that reaching out to the centre, the old Peter Robinson theory, is the way to reach those people, the best way to reach them, because Alliance seems to be driving them away by being too liberal. So I think the UUP can see that perhaps it can get some of those voters by effectively having a more sort of right of centre culture war position, and that's gradually shoving unionism away from the middle as well. So the whole bloc is effectively moving to the right.
Noel, you've an interesting column as well. You compare the approaches in the types of situations between Peter Robinson and Gavin Robinson. And you could maybe argue that we saw an element of that in the conversation that we've just had. What went before and what's going now?
I think Peter Robinson is a name which is very much under discussion at the moment. As we mentioned, he managed to go to Michael D. Higgins' inauguration without any difficulty, which shows how far backwards we've gone. But I suppose the point about Peter Robinson is that a staunch unionist. I had many colourful exchanges with him going back to the good old days of Castlereagh Council and a few ups and downs, but he always had a strategy, he always had a plan, and it was a sophisticated one in that he wanted to reach out to different communities. He managed to embrace the GEA. He managed to avoid alienating different sections of society, and he made it quite clear that he was actively looking to what might happen if a border poll ever came. He talked about a house insurance policy. He didn't think the house would burn down, but he wanted to have a house insurance policy. It now looks as though some of his successors in the DUP want to bet that house on their belief that there will not be a border poll, and I don't think Peter Robinson would agree with him.
And can I just ask you, if you say Peter Robinson had a strategy and that's what he was good at, do you think Gavin Robinson has a strategy?
I think many people are surprised by the transformation in Gavin Robinson over the last period of time.
Because his position appears to have hardened.
Significantly. I mean, I don't want to end his career by suggesting that he might have been regarded at one stage as a liberal, but he didn't go out of his way to annoy people. There was a fairly measured approach. That's all gone out the window, and you know the parachute regiment banner is one thing, but even when he talked about the faux outrage over people who are concerned about 50,000 dead men, women and mostly children in Gaza, I think that really grated with a lot of people, and to a certain extent, you know, we're looking at a given Gavin going astray process, which is not to the benefit of our structures, and you would wonder where it's all going to end up. If these culture wars, where is the line in the mud? I think a line has been crossed in recent weeks.
What did you make of the exchange we saw around the table tonight?
There was a lot of talking about Israel and Gaza from MLAs and MPs from Northern Ireland, and whatever your view of that war, I think it is becoming a little grotesque that so much of our own parochial politics is becoming dominated by proxy arguments over this. I don't think it's respectful to anyone. I think that the debate, the no confidence motion debate that's taking place in Stormont is pointless. It won't achieve anything. The place to raise the issues that concerns that people have about the Minister's visit are in the Education Committee. And it has turned into a more or less complete orange-green split, not perfectly, but that is how it is divided. And I think that it was a mistake for Alliance to become involved in that. It should have stood above it. I think that once again, they're allowing themselves to be picked apart by other people's arguments, and they will ultimately be the losers from this debate, because unionism is trying. It has a strategy, whether it's a good one or not. You can disagree, but it's trying. Just be a principal stand. It's trying to pick votes off from Alliance, and that's inevitably going to provoke a nationalist reaction. The toxic Thunderdome arguments that Andrew Muir, the minister, made in the Assembly, that was following rebukes and exchanges he'd had with the SDLP. That's one of the bitterest rivalries in the Assembly. The SDLP is going to be trying to reclaim some voters from Alliance. So unionism, the most obvious fault I can see in this unionist strategy is it's going to provoke a reaction from nationalism. The two blocs, the unionism won't get ahead of the nationalist bloc the way it thinks it does. They're both just killing off the centre ground politics that emerged from 2019.
Do you think we're going to stagger along to May 2027, or do you think things could be curtailed between now and then? When you hear somebody like Paul Givan saying, I'm not in partnership, I'm not a partner with Sinn Féin in government, did that surprise you?
It did quite a lot, because to a certain extent it sounded as though Paul Givan was still fighting the battles of 1998 and that he was still disturbed about Peter Robinson coming into the education department at that time, when in fact Peter Robinson much later on and Ian Paisley embraced Martin McGuinness and brought him into the Deputy First Minister's position. And it just looked as though issues that had been resolved a long time ago were being brought up again. I would have said 6 months ago that it would have taken an earthquake to prevent this assembly going.
It's a great reversal from when Paul Givan was First Minister as well, which was a position he seemed to embrace, and it seemed to moderate him a little. So he has gone back not just from the Robinson McGuinness era, but even from his own era a few years ago.
Are you both saying you think this is more than just a wobble? I mean, is this actually an existential threat to the continuation of devolution?
It can get out of hand. Neither main party wants to collapse Stormont. That's not in their interests. But accidents happen. The collapse in 2017 wasn't something that Martin McGuinness wanted, but the atmosphere continued to be poisoned until it fell.
And so what are we to make of David Brooks' comments tonight, where he talked about a lack of reciprocation on the part of the nationalism towards unionism? And nationalists will presumably say, well, look, Michelle O'Neill, for the second year in a row, is going to go to the cenotaph and lay a wreath on Sunday morning.
I think Sinn Féin made many mistakes over symbolic issues in the past, but if we look at Michelle O'Neill in recent times, she went to the coronation of King Charles in 2023, which was a much more difficult task for a Republican than for a Unionist to go to Dublin. As you say, she'll be at the cenotaph. That's what First Ministers and Deputy First Ministers should do. If we find difficulty with that, there are going to be difficulties in maintaining these structures, and I think we can see a set of circumstances in which events could go downhill quite quickly unfolding. We're not there yet, but we could be heading in that direction.
Why do Unionists not weigh that up? Why do they not see those moves as in any way reciprocal?
I think it's a very fundamental point that Unionists see the Good Friday Agreement as a settlement and Nationalists see it as a process.
As a staging process.
As a staging process. And sometimes you see that in gesture politics. I think for many Unionists, they genuinely and warmly believe that the appropriate reciprocal gesture to Michelle O'Neill attending the cenotaph is to welcome her to the cenotaph. That's the balance that they would think. But whereas for many nationalists are thinking, well, she's made a huge gesture that's painful for us, so now we expect you to
do something commensurate in return.
But Sinn Féin isn't specifically saying what that is, but clearly there is an expectation from nationalism that now some enormous leap needs to be made equally by unionism. But many Unionists genuinely don't see it that way.
OK, would it be a mistake on the part of Emma Little-Pengelly, in your view, and it is only your view, not to go down to the inauguration next week?
Oh, I think that she should go down, both as a gesture, but also for the cynical, practical reason that I think that they need to keep a falling out with the Irish president if they want to have one as a card to play sometime down the line. One thing I think that could happen, of course, is that Sinn Féin could find that it is handcuffed itself to a politician it doesn't control. I wonder how that relationship is going to pan out over the next 7 or 14 years.
OK, 10 seconds, Noel. I assume you think she should go down. Do you think she will go down?
She's left it very late. All the indications are that she won't go down. But I mean, we've seen this before. Unionists rejected Mary McAleese and changed their position on her. I think they should give Catherine Connolly a chance. OK, we've got to leave it there, folks. Thank you very much indeed. That's all we've got time for tonight. I'll be back at the weekend with Sunday Politics at the later time of 1:15 on BBC One and iPlayer. For now, though, from everyone in the team, thanks for watching. Good night.